Hey, welcome. Well, I somehow managed to escape that family of inbreds and have decided I won't be taking any more random trips throughout the United States for a while at least. Instead, I figured I would just take things a little easy and maybe talk a little X-Files. Today we're looking at Teliko, episode 3 of season 4. Debuting October 18th, 1996, Teliko places the agents in the midst of a rash of disappearances in Philadelphia that may be the result of an ancient African folktale. The episode begins on a flight to Philadelphia, and here's a fun fact for you. This plane set was actually created for later episodes Tempest Fugit and Max, but they spent all this time and money building it, so might as well get some use out of it. This gentleman made the unwise decision of eating airplane food and desperately needs the bathroom. Unfortunately for him, he has no idea that he's being watched by the most foul creature in the X-Files yet, an albino. This guy has some of the creepiest eyes I've ever seen. So the flight attendant comes looking for the gentleman, unaware he's having a really hard time in the bathroom.
I have seen shit that'll turn you white.
We then go to the FBI where Scully is brought in and met by a doctor from the CDC. You'd think with everything she's experienced with the CDC, she'd be a little less trusting. Anyway, Skinner asks her what she knows about the men disappearing in Philadelphia, and that's when she's handed a photo of one of the latest victims who was found but seemingly completely drained of his skin color, which is really weird.
The depigmentation we're seeing may actually be characteristic of a disease.
So Mr. CDC here thinks these men have contracted a virus or something that is causing these strange deaths. But that doesn't explain why they've all gone missing. A virus doesn't just make people vanish into thin air. Anyway, Scully begins her examination of the body they do have, and Mulder decides to pay her a little visit.
He was reported as the 4th kidnap victim in Philadelphia until his body turned up last night looking like this.
There's a Michael Jackson joke in here somewhere, but I can't quite find it.
Now, hilariously, Scully has been tasked with finding what killed this young man and what removed the pigmentation from his skin. However, if Scully and the CDC both think this is the result of some deadly disease, then where the hell is the PPE? I mean, Mulder comes waltzing in, just wearing his suit and chomping on some sunflower seeds. Oh, a deadly disease, you say? Let me eat these sunflower seeds. Mulder doesn't really say much, but in classic X-Files fashion, thinks there's more going on than what appears. He also steals all the hair and tissue samples Scully took from the body, and seeing as how they could be infected with a deadly disease, I'm not quite sure that's protocol.
Samuel Aboa.
Yes?
I'm Marcos Duff.
We then meet Samuel Oboa, an African immigrant who's trying to obtain citizenship, and his social worker, Marcus Duff. Samuel is my kind of guy, because I too need to have everything completely dark like a vampire. This episode is so dull so far that the most interesting thing is just how orange this light bulb is. While those two jibber-jabber over Samuel's paperwork, Mulder meets with Agent Pendrell, who I guess was the poor sap who received all the infected tissue samples.
Should we wait for Agent Scully? I just don't want to have to repeat myself.
She's not coming.
Why not?
She had a date. Breathe, Agent Pendrell. It's with a dead man. She's doing an autopsy.
I love that everyone seems to know that Pendrell has a thing for Scully, except for Scully. Well, Agent Pendrell discovers some kind of seed from a rare passion flower from West Africa. This seed contains some toxic properties that in large enough quantities could be deadly, although Scully hasn't found any trace of any toxin in the blood of the young man's body. She did find his pituitary gland necrotized, which is awesome, because my favorite Diablo 2 character is the Necromancer, but this appears to be what caused the young man to lose his pigmentation, as the pituitary gland controls the production of hormones and melanin in the skin cells. Lots of sciencey jargon being thrown around, so who better to clear things up than Marita Covarrubias, who is well known for her scientific background.
Do you know anything about this case?
No.
Well, that was a waste of time. Meanwhile, this poor kid is getting shot in the neck with one of those weird seeds they pulled off the previous victim's body. The bus pulls up and the driver clearly sees that there's something not quite right with this picture, but just assumes it's drugs and he drives off. Hilariously, the following morning, the bus driver is speaking with Scully and he's all, "Oh, the kid looked sick and I asked him if he needed help," trying to make himself look like he actually gave a shit and didn't just blow the kid off thinking he was all drugged up. While Scully thinks that maybe the kid was sick, Mulder thinks if they find the kid, they'll find another one of those seeds. He also shares with her photos of the man from the plane, which were supposed to be kept under wraps and not shown to anyone.
A boa? What the hell kind of name is that?
Out of all the names in the X-Files, a boa is the one people think is weird. How about Fox Mulder? The police are canvassing the area and ask Samuel if he's seen the missing young man. Now, if they just move their head 2 inches to the left, they might notice the kid sitting on Samuel's couch. The police leave and then Samuel pulls something out of his mouth. I don't know what the hell it is, but by the look on this kid's face, it's not good. The agents speak with Marcus and tell him they could be dealing with a possible health crisis with one of the more recent immigrants. Also, I'm just going to point out that Scully looks really good in this scene. I hope Mulder and Pendrell know how to fight because I did take a month of Taekwondo when I was 9 years old.
It has to be here, Mulder. There has to be some evidence of a virus or bacterium.
Scully is still under the impression that it's a virus they're dealing with, and yet no PPE. They pay a visit to Samuel's apartment, but he's not home at the moment. Well, until he gets dropped off from work. Unfortunately for the agents, this guy can run. I mean, they lose him almost immediately. And as much as I love Scully, how fast did she think he was running that he was able to go right through the fence?
Hey, Scully. Look at this.
Well, they found Samuel, and he sure was able to squeeze into that tiny crevice. What I would like to know is how the hell they managed to get him out. They perform some tests on him, but don't find anything that would suggest he's carrying some kind of disease. Marcus comes in ranting and raving, demanding to know why Samuel was arrested, but he was only arrested because he ran when the agents wanted to speak to him. Regardless, Mulder thinks there's something else going on that they're just not seeing. He meets with the diplomat from Burkina Faso, believing he might be able to get some answers about what happened to the man on the plane that was flying into the US from his country. The man tells Mulder of an old folk tale called the Teliko, spirits of the air, and is running with one of these spirits when he was a kid. Meanwhile, Samuel has managed to get inside a hospital dining car and make his escape.
This patient appears to have something in his throat, some kind of aberrant bone growth or maybe something foreign lodged in his esophagus.
Scully finds some rather interesting things from Samuel's examination. For one, he has some strange object lodged in his throat, and two, he has no pituitary gland. Although he could survive the no pituitary gland, he'd just need to be on medication to replace those hormones for the rest of his life. Mulder then comes in to give them the fantastic news that Samuel has escaped, and it looks like he set his sights on his buddy Marcus. I would love to know how this thing is supposed to work exactly, because it just looks like he's giving Marcus a lobotomy. Before Samuel can finish his handiwork, he's interrupted by a cop and goes into hiding. Mulder seems to think Samuel is part of some lost tribe of African albinos who've evolved in such a way that they need to extract the hormones from others in order to survive. Now, if you're part of said lost tribe, where are you getting those hormones from? I would think most lost tribes probably don't have contact with anyone outside of their own circle. It just seems like a really inefficient evolutionary trait.
Why are we here, Mulder?
Pendrell found asbestos fibers on Owen Sanders' body. And you remove asbestos from an old building before you tear it down.
They pull up to a demolition site because Mulder believes there's a possibility that Samuel could be inside. Now, how fast is Samuel? We saw him run earlier and he was pretty fast, but the agents have been driving for some time. You're telling me that he somehow made it inside this building that appears to be quite the distance away from where he attacked Marcus? Mulder gets shot by Samuel's little toxic seed shooter, but luckily for Mulder, he has Scully with him. If he had the bus driver with him, the guy would just think he's on drugs and leave him for dead. Scully hears noises coming from a nearby vent, so obviously she has to go inside and see what's up. She finds Mulder, who's obviously paralyzed from the shot, and this scene feels like it was ripped directly from Alien. And there it is, the one creepy scene in the entire episode. He's pretty damn fast though, because how did she miss him? Scully pulls Mulder out of the vent, and he has to play a round of charades to try and warn her that Samuel is right behind her. Couldn't outrun the bullet that time. Luckily, Marcus survived his encounter with Samuel, and Samuel survived his gunshot. Though for some reason they can't figure out how to keep Samuel alive with hormone replacements, so he's probably going to die before he can stand trial. But couldn't he just escape from the room if he's able to fit into small spaces? It's not like he's tied down or anything. You know, I'm not really a fan of this one. It's fine, and I've watched way worse things, but this entire episode is basically a retread of 2 better episodes. First, you have the similarities to Squeeze. Samuel seems to have the same uncanny ability to climb into small spaces to attack or hide, just like Tooms. They also end up tracking Samuel down into a building that's about to be torn down, which is kind of similar to the building that Tooms lived in. The other similarity is Virgil and Kanto from Too Shy. Samuel might not be draining the fat from women, but instead he's draining the hormones from African men. And just like Virgil, because he's unable to get what sustains him, he appears to be dying at the end of the episode as well. The makeup can look kind of eerie, but I don't want to sit here and make it sound like I think albino people are freaky looking, because that's not what I'm saying. But there are a few shots that I think are genuinely unnerving. Like I mentioned, the scene in the vent that I think is pretty effective. You get a ramp up of noise and quick shots of Samuel that all work well together. And as far as the makeup goes, the eyes are my favorite part. There's a brief scene in the very beginning after he attacks the man on the plane where the color starts to fill in his one eye, which is pretty cool. I enjoy the overall concept or the idea, but it's a little too much been there, done that. Teliko was written by Howard Gordon and grew from an idea he was working on about a person who might be immortal. And no, not Scully. However, after running it by one of the other producers, his idea quickly morphed into a story about melanin-sucking albino vampires, which is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. But not too ridiculous for Chris Carter, who approved the idea. Although the first pass of his script was rejected by the writing team and the entire thing had to be rewritten. Chris Carter added to the script by including the weapon used to remove the pituitary gland, and writer John Sheban suggested Samuel come from Burkina Faso, as he had some dealings with them through a previous job. One of the bigger struggles with the episode was the casting. They wanted to use real African actors and tried everything from auditioning actors from a passing African theater troupe to African consulates to even contacting the Olympic Committee. Eventually they settled on veteran actor Carl Lumbly, known for roles like Marcus Dixon from Alias and Mark Petrie from Cagney and Lacey, for the role of Marcus Duff, the social worker, and Willie Amaki, a 4-time member of the Ghanaian Olympic track team, for the role of Samuel Aboa. Willie had been living in California the prior decade, playing small roles in film and TV, and had just returned home from competing in the 1996 Olympics when he was offered the role. The makeup process of turning Willie from black to white and then black again was quite the ordeal. The makeup crew studied pictures of African albinos and people that have vitiligo so they can get the right look. Poor Willie was caked in makeup. His darker complexion proved to be difficult to work with, and he was covered in layers of cover-up and white powder. They even added a bit of pink powder for a bit of color. His hair was even dyed a bright orange, so the process of changing it from black and white would be a bit easier. Willie said, "Back at the hotel, people thought I was the African Dennis Rodman." After the show had completed filming and finally released, Willie asked some friends of his who had watched it with their children what they thought, and they said, "Willie, we love you very much, but stay away from the kids for a while." When Teliko was released, it received a pretty mixed reaction. Some didn't care for it because it felt like a retread of Squeeze, and others because they took offense to the racial overtones. Although I think the racial overtones thing is a bit silly. The episode isn't great, but I don't think anything in it was done with malice. It's always difficult to bring in unfamiliar cultures, but I appreciate the attempt and I think it was done sincerely. The only thing that I would have preferred is if the episode was based on an actual African folktale and not something they just kind of made up. Regardless, the episode doesn't appear to be a favorite of many, as it sits at 6.6 on IMDb, which is pretty low. It's not Teso dos Bichos low, but it's low enough. I would probably give it a 5 myself. I have seen it many times during my rewatches of the show, but it's not a favorite, barely passable. But fret not, because things pick up with a pretty creepy episode as Mulder and Scully track a serial killer who leaves behind clues through psychic photography in the episode Unruh. And I'm sorry to any German-speaking people out there, but I cannot for the life of me pronounce that word. Anyways, let me know down in the comments what you think of Teliko. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. Hopefully I see you in the next video, and stay spooky!
A series of murders unsolved.
4 young men missing over the past 3 months.
Evidence that's unexplainable.
This guy can squeeze into a coffee can, Scully. He could be anywhere.
And a shocking ending.
Scully!
That's unbelievable.
No!
A brand new X-Files, Friday at 9, 8 Central.